The last 2 months has seen this channel go over Taboo Conspiracy's moon landing video with a fine tooth comb, enlisting casual spaceman's help on the way. Today we finish the series by taking a final look at his video and putting the matter to bed once and for all. This is Debunking Taboo Conspiracy 3. Hello all and welcome along to another episode of Tinfoil Tuesday with me, Simon Dan. Thank you very much for joining me. Yes, Taboo Conspiracy has had a hard time accepting my debunks, as he released this video after part 1 and this video after part 2. One can only wonder what visual delights await after this one. So we join Taboo Conspiracy's video when he starts to talk about Exhibit 9, which has something to do with the Lunar Rover.
Exhibit 9, the ridiculous Lunar Rover. First, how in the world did NASA plan for a fold-up dune buggy to attach only on the later Apollo flights? The Lunar Rover was only used on Apollo 15, 16, and 17. Are we to believe that NASA left a big trunk for a fold-up dune buggy in the designs of the lunar lander? It had wheels, it had batteries, it had seats, a satellite dish, and other components in addition to the frame. That's not something that you fit in your luggage.
Well, that is exactly what happened. There was a storage area in the lunar lander and NASA filled that storage area with a folded up lunar rover. Not that hard to believe, is it?
Next, the fold-up dune buggy was on one side of the craft. Was it not a concern for NASA to test fly the lunar lander with extra weight on one side of the craft? Of course, NASA never thought it necessary to perform even one test flight.
Well, that is the beauty of going to the moon. Everything weighs less when you get there. NASA did need to be strict with the weight limit for the lunar rover, and it weighed 217 kilograms here on Earth at takeoff. However, once they got to the moon, it weighed a paltry 36 kilograms.
Next, there was no scientific purpose of the lunar rover other than it looked neat for the movie cameras. This is another instance where you need to apply some common sense. By introducing a moon buggy, which had no scientific purpose, NASA was taking the unreasonable and reckless risk that one of its astronauts would get injured, jostled, cause a malfunction in one of the packs, or break down. How easy would it have been for an astronaut to hit a rock and cause a part of his suit to malfunction, or for the astronaut to get thrown from the vehicle? What if the vehicle broke down after hitting a rock covered in dust? This wasn't a minor risk, as is clearly seen in the photographs. The astronauts had poor visibility and were cruising around in conditions like these, where even the smallest problem could kill the astronaut.
Extremely poor reasoning here from Taboo Conspiracy. All of the moon missions carried risk, of course they did. You only need to look at what happened to Apollo 13 to understand that. But to say there was no scientific reasoning for the lunar rover is just nonsense. The variety of sites Apollo astronauts were able to visit with the lunar rover gave us far more scientific return from these missions than we would have ever been able to gather otherwise, deepening our understanding of the lunar environment and the moon's evolution.
There's simply no way that the reckless lunar rover would have happened. What's even more funny about the lunar rover is the fact that it really looks like it was just a remote-controlled car with an action figure. The astronaut never moves from his uncomfortable position.
Probably for the very reasons you were just talking about. They hardly needed to stick their head out the window, did they?
But even more damning is the fact that many times the rover didn't produce tracks, or produced tracks in strange ways. Here is a sampling of photographs of the strange and missing rover tracks.
Many of the pictures you showed there were of the lunar rover next to the lunar lander, which suggests that it had just been built. Strange that you didn't show this picture, or this one, or this one. Hang on, that one's got tracks in it. Hilarious.
Exhibit 10, proof of secondary light sources. Of course, NASA could have easily filmed the Apollo movies with just one light source, but NASA needed those thousands of studio quality photos, and so NASA did use other light sources. Mythbusters tried to deceive its audience by busting this photograph by using a grainy, darkened version, and still failed to create the lighted astronaut as depicted in the demonstration.
I think the Mythbusters' point was that Buzz Aldrin could be illuminated by only one light source, which they achieved, because I believe that the argument is he should be completely in darkness.
I changed out the darkened NASA photo used by Mythbusters and replaced it with the NASA original. Do you see the huge difference? Now, compare the original NASA photo with the Mythbusters version. Mythbusters certainly did not bust this argument whatsoever, and Mythbusters lied about it. But what's more telling is what Mythbusters ignored, and that's this photograph. This one photograph proves the entire Apollo mission's false, as it is 100% impossible for that astronaut to be lit up like that on the shaded side of the lunar lander without additional light sources.
The moon has a reflective surface. This photo would have been taken with the largest aperture possible, as denoted by this guide, depending on where the sun was for each photo.
Exhibit 11, the tinfoil thin lander. According to McGowan, another curious fact that first on the moon made note of was that, according to Harold Loden, Apollo 11 mission controller, the skin on the crew cabin of the lunar module was very thin, and that was all done because of weight savings. Another talking head added that if you really took your finger and poked hard at it, you could poke right through the outer skin of the spacecraft. It was about the thickness of 2 layers of aluminum foil.
So?
Project manager Thomas Kelly concurred, noting that the aluminum alloy skin of the crew compartment was about 12 1/1000ths of an inch thick. That's equivalent to about 3 layers of Reynolds wrap that you would use in your kitchen. Astronaut Lavelle stated, "Whenever I saw a model of the lunar module, it had these rigid sides, and it really looked strong. Turns out that external portions of the lunar module are made up of mylar and cellophane, and it's put together with scotch tape and staples. We'd had to have pads on the floor, because if you dropped a screwdriver, it would go right through the floor."
Still don't see your point.
And astronauts lived in this for days with multiple repressurizations, and merely dropping a screwdriver would kill them. As pointed out by David McGowan, the lunar lander actually failed the Grumman pressure test, which blew out a window, and no one seemed to care as no design changes were ever made. Come on.
As far as I could find out, that test blew the windows out of the lunar lander at 42 psi. The pressure inside the lunar lander during the moon missions was under 5 psi, so why would you make changes?
Exhibit 12, the inverse square law of light. I think it was maybe Jeranism or Globebusters or both who first mentioned this, but this is a terrific proof of the fake moon landings, and it deals with how much illumination there would have been on the lunar surface according to the heliocentric model. The inverse square law describes the intensity of light at different distances from a light source. Every light source is different, but the intensity changes in the same way, meaning this is a law for all light sources.
I love it when they try and use scientific laws to try and disprove other scientific things. Glorious, isn't it?
The intensity of light is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. This means that as the distance from a light source increases, the intensity of light is equal to a value multiplied by 1 divided by d squared. Here are the simple equations.
An even simpler way of putting it is if the light source is twice as far away, then the same amount of light is spread over an area 4 times greater. If it's 4 times further away, the same amount of light is spread over an area 16 times greater. You square it each time.
As an example, if you place a 100 lumen bulb in a floodlight that shines on only 1 square meter of surface, that surface will be lit at 100 lux. However, if you back the floodlight away to shine on 4 square meters, the surface is now lit with 25 lux. The full moon, which is supposed to be reflecting sunlight, has an illuminance up to 1 lux on the Earth's surface.
That is actually not true. That's Wikipedia for you. You generally don't get an intensity greater than 0.25 lux, which, let's remember, is 0.25 lumens per square meter.
That's not substantial, but a full moon has enough illuminance to read from it, here on Earth. It is allegedly 376,285 kilometers to the moon, from Earth's surface to moon surface. Let's assume our Apollo astronaut is 0.01 kilometers, or 1 meter, above the surface of the moon. We now plug the numbers into our inverse square law equation to find the intensity of the moonlight at the surface, solving for intensity at distance 2. I have the numbers on the printout, but you can see for yourself the problem. Sunlight has an illuminance up to 128,000 lux on Earth. That's pretty bright.
Yes it is, because it's a giant nuclear reactor.
That's as bright as it gets. Assuming my math and figures are right, applying the inverse square law, the Apollo astronauts would have experienced 1,106,175,009,570 times more illuminance on the moon's surface than direct sunlight on Earth.
Wow, that's bright, isn't it? The problem is, you've been a bit deceitful here with your equation. The numbers work and the maths work, don't get me wrong, but you started off with the wrong numbers in the first place. The equation you used was to determine different intensities of light from a single light source at different distances. The astronauts from Apollo 11 were effectively dealing with kind of two different light sources. One was the sun, which would have had the same intensity pretty much as we feel here on Earth. The other was the sunlight reflecting off the moon. The reason your calculations don't work is because you are negating albedo. The moon's surface reflects only 12% of the sun's light. So by your freakish calculations, someone standing in Antarctica, which has an albedo of 90%, would experience light intensity way more than that stupid number you just came up with there. In order for your calculation to have worked, you would have need to know the intensity of light directly from the moon's surface and then work out the intensity from 1 meter away. And if you understood the law properly, you would have realized that the change in intensity of light would have been barely noticeable. You cannot work backwards from the luminosity of the moon that we experience here on Earth and then apply the same law. It doesn't work like that. You have completely misused those numbers to come up with something that suits your agenda. Shame on you, Taboo Conspiracy.
Essentially, based on the inverse square law, at the moon's surface, the light would have been the most blinding light imaginable, and there should have been no photographs possible on the lunar surface. This proves, based on physical laws, without a doubt, that there were no Apollo moon landings.
No, this proves that you do not understand the physical laws that you were referring to.
There are so many more proofs that I haven't listed, but I'm getting tired.
Yeah, me too. I think we should end it now before we see any more of those dirty tricks. Right, that wraps up this 3-video series of Taboo Conspiracy. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for watching today's Tinfoil Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please do like and subscribe. I have been Simon Dan. Have yourselves a great Tuesday, and I'll see you all tomorrow for a fresh comments video. See you then.